With a short week ahead of us, the 49ers play the Giants on Thursday. You know, Tuesday is a very obvious recap still of the previous game. This week, I don't know what to do with my hands. I'm so confused. What's going on Thursday? Are they playing? Should we talk about that? Should we talk about the previous game? I think we're going to stick with talking mostly about the Rams game, but there is multiple things that we need to talk about as well. In fact, the main thing, which is the last thing we're going to talk about, so make sure you stick around, which is the Brock Purdy conversation. I feel like people are afraid to have a real conversation when it comes to Brock Purdy. So we're going to talk through that, but there's so much more that we're going to get to, and we're going to do it all next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Tuesday afternoon, which means I've got my guy, Ryan Hensley, with me. Ryan, what's up, my man?
Not much, man. Good to be here. As always, every Tuesday, I'm looking forward to I always look forward to this show. I get to do one with Grant on Monday and then with you on Tuesday. And it really gets the week going, man. So glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the chat's been going crazy. I mean, it started. We got Michael Monahan in here going back and forth with people at like 11:25. So almost an hour before the show started. You got to love the energy. Mike, shout out to you, man. We didn't get to link up at the game in Pittsburgh, but it sounds like you're a little under the weather. You got some COVID. So hopefully you're feeling better. We already got some super chats. So let's knock these out real quick and then we'll get into our topics. Keenan Gim says, good morning, Jesse, and to the Niner gang. Good morning, y'all. Gammon says, two of the biggest Brandon Allen haters on stage.
Nice. That's a
nice,
good one, man.
Gammon.
One,
nice. He's good. He always calls me a Brandon Allen hater. I think it's hilarious. All right, let's get into topic number one, because last week I made a video about Kyle Shanahan and his leadership, and it was such a small moment that happened in the locker room with he and Brock Purdy. I thought it was a bit of an awkward bro hug thing. Some people said they didn't think it was awkward. I definitely did, but that's beside the point. The point that I was really trying to make is Shanahan really loves Brock Purdy, and he's doing everything he can to show through his leadership that he does. And I think that's fantastic. But his leadership to me is starting to branch out. Yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, but he talked about Christian McCaffrey. And this has been a hot topic of ours, Ryan, where, is Christian McCaffrey playing too much? And this dates back to last year. It's like, man, get this guy some rest. You're going to get him hurt. We're seeing running backs. Shout out to Nick Chubb, man. Prayers out to you. I hope you're okay. He had an awful injury yesterday. Absolutely horrific. Looked exactly like the McGahee injury at Miami way back in the day at college. We saw Saquon almost lose his season yet again. A lot of injuries around the league. And it seems like Shanahan is just going crazy using Christian McCaffrey like he can't get hurt. But Shanahan came out yesterday and talked about how that's on him. Normally, it's up to the position coaches to decide who plays and who doesn't in a rotation. But looking back at the game, seeing that Christian McCaffrey played every single snap, he's like, listen, at some point, I got to be better at that, and I've got to recognize and get somebody else in the game. The buck stops with me. I haven't heard Shanahan and seen Shanahan be this vulnerable to me up until this year. And I think that there's a clear shift in his leadership. And more so than anything, I wanted to give him a shout out. But what do you think about it? Because I know that you and I have both been critical of Shanahan at different points throughout his career. But overall, what are you seeing from Shanahan and how do you feel about it?
I just saw that little clip, and that is good. I mean, it's not often you hear Kyle Shanahan admit anything that he is making a mistake at or doing wrong or needs to correct. I can't honestly recall it. So, I mean, actually, the Trey Lance thing, I feel like I let him down. That was probably the first time I heard him say something like that. And then this thing with Christian McCaffrey saying that that's on him, he needs to change it. It's good. It's a good sign. That is leadership. That's what you want from a coach. When you're a head coach, honestly, like I was a head coach for 10 years, lower level, obviously, not the NFL, but When my team won, I gave my team the full credit for the win. When my team lost, I put it on myself, at least publicly, right? Behind closed doors, I might be telling the players, hey, this is what you guys got to do better, this or that. But
for sure,
publicly, I put it on me, like to the parents and to the staff, etc. So that's leadership. That's what you want from Kyle Shanahan. It's good to see. He is correct, though. Like, CMC is trending the second most carries of his career right now. If he continues at this trajectory, it'll be the second most carries of his career. And, you expect a lot of carries for CMC with the Panthers because he was everything at the Panthers. I mean, and he's pretty much everything here right now for the 49ers too, but they got so many weapons. They don't need to do that, I don't think, with Christian McCaffrey here. And so it was good to see him take accountability from a leadership standpoint, and it's a good idea to maybe dial it back just a little bit for Christian McCaffrey and keep him healthy.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think we can all agree there. I will say this, though, and I said it in the post game. There's a lot of things that I'm going to say in a post game show that I may change my mind on a day or two later. And usually those things are going to be based on film breakdown. Maybe I'll go back and watch the film and I'll say, hey, I thought this player played good initially, but when you really go back and watch it, not so good, or vice versa. But there are certain things that are feeling based. And one of those is Christian McCaffrey. Is he playing too much football? And sometimes you get a feeling throughout it where you're like, man, I really wish you would have sat him. And sometimes you don't get that feeling at all. It was interesting that he played every snap this last week, but I actually never got the feeling that he was on the field too much or they should have taken him out, because you look at his touches, they weren't extremely high. And I'm not going to be one of those guys that comes back 2 days later or hours later because everybody else is talking about it and go back on what I thought throughout the game. What I thought throughout the game was that his usage was fine. And so I still feel that. But the fact that Shanahan is willing to acknowledge that, to me, it shows just a ton of growth. A ton of growth. And I think it's growth that a lot of people question, like, could this happen? It's hard. I mean, you're a 40-plus-year-old male, you're pretty much set in your ways. There's little things you can change, but leadership is one of those things that you've truly got to be willing to make a shift. And it starts with you noticing that maybe there's some things or issues within my leadership that can change. And to me, he's done that. And I just have to give him all the credit in the world. I love to see it. I don't know that it's going to result in a Super Bowl or anything like that. I don't even know that if times get tough, that these types of leadership changes are going to stick. But for right now, it feels really good, and I love to see it. And I just wanted to give him a shout out for it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a little humbling that took place with the whole Trey Lance debacle, because that's the most humbled I've seen him was in that press conference, having to explain that. So maybe that overall that humbled him a little bit. And I know we're talking about leadership, but and you were talking about usage, but in regards to the usage for CMC, I think there's two things that we're talking about, right? Like the first game against the Steelers, it's okay, you could have pulled him out earlier, but throughout the season, what I would like to see is just. It's not about just pulling him out earlier. It's about, hey, mixing a little Elijah Mitchell here and there, mixing a little Jordan Mason here and there. And that will also cut down his usage. So I think a little bit more of that, regardless of the score, is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I definitely think after the first game, and we talked about it last week, I felt like there were moments that he shouldn't have been in there. This week, I didn't feel like that, even though he played every snap. But the game was a lot closer, too. When the game's closer, you need your best players out there. It is interesting that Mitchell's getting nothing. I mean, somebody said that in the chat that Mitchell's not good. I disagree with that. Mitchell can't stay healthy, though that's different than not being good. And so maybe if he plays even a few snaps, he gets injured. But Mitchell doesn't fumble the ball. That's what you need, especially if you're late in a game and you're trying to wear down the defense. Mitchell's not going to fumble, so you got that going for you. And I think he's a pretty damn good player. He just can't stay healthy is really what it comes down to. So I don't know. And I think Mason's good too. Now, Mason hasn't fumbled in a game, but he had some fumble issues throughout the preseason. Maybe they're a little leery of that. I don't know. But you carried 4 running backs on this team, and none of them are playing a lick of snaps right now other than CMC. It's like you got to play. So like this Thursday, I'm going to be very curious at what the workload is. It's just 4 days after the last game, and I want to see what that workload looks like. I have to see what that workload looks like, and I hope first of all, I think the 49ers should win this game handily, especially with no Barkley out there. But I think we should see that workload of CMC take a significant drop.
Yeah, I mean, just give 5 carries to Mitchell. You know, 4
Yeah.
or 5 carries.
Yeah.
That could be the biggest difference for Christian McCaffrey, I think. But in defense of Kyle Shanahan, I will say Christian McCaffrey is like one of the MVP candidates in the league right now. It is hard to take him off. I mean, he leads rushing by like 60 yards over the next guy, so it's tough.
Randall says it was his comment. I just saw the comment. I didn't see who said it, Randall. But yes, if you were being sarcastic, I feel it. It's hard to do that through text. But either way, Mitchell's a good player. So you were being sarcastic. I appreciate that. But I just have to say that he's a good player. So anyways, all right. Let's talk about this O-line, because I think there was definitely a lot of opportunity coming out of that Pittsburgh Steelers game. Pretty much everybody saw it. I don't know that I get that feeling this week from the media or just in general from the fan base. Feels like it's quieted down a little bit on the O-line front. How do you perceive the O-line after this week 2 victory? Do you feel any better about it than you did the prior week? Do you feel worse about it? The same? Where's your headspace at on the especially the right side of the O-line? We'll talk about that.
I think I feel pretty close to the same, actually. After thinking about it and kind of looking at everything, Brock Purdy got the ball out quick. I think I read somewhere, I should have looked up the statistic, but I think it was his second fastest as far as like getting the ball out of his hands. It was like his second best game in that regard. So he got the ball out quick out of his hands. There wasn't a lot of opportunity. I mean, same reason. We'll talk about the D-line in a second as well, but the ball was coming out very quickly, so they didn't have to hold up for very long. I think it's still TBD with the right side. There's sometimes you see Burford doing good things, sometimes not so good. McKivitz was probably better than Burford this week and maybe the week prior. I just think we need to see more. I mean, TJ Watt is his own beast. He might be the defensive player of the year right now so far. So it's very hard to judge McKivitz off of TJ Watt, right? But then they go against the Rams and they do okay. But again, Purdy's getting that ball out really quickly. So I just think it's something that we're going to have to judge over a long period of time, at least a few more games to see. I think we'll really know when they go against the Cowboys. If they hold up against the Cowboys, that'll be a great indication for the 49ers O-line.
Shay says that they played bums. Here's what I'll say is I actually think we're going to know a lot more. We're going to know a lot more each and every week, but I actually think the Giants defensive line will make things interesting. Now, I don't think the Giants team will make things interesting, but I think after the fact, when we go back and watch it, you get the all 22 and you're able to take a look at things, I think we're going to have a much better understanding of where the O-line is truly at. Dexter Lawrence is, to me, the most underrated player in the whole NFL. This man is an absolute beast. And there are other good players along that defensive line that will make things interesting and will challenge the right side of the offensive line for the 49ers. So I think that's going to be a good test, and especially going back and looking at it. I will say this, immediately after the game, and I said it in the post game, I felt a lot better about the right side of the offensive line. But then I went back and watched, and I don't feel any better about the right side of the offensive line. McKivitz and Burford have good reps, no doubt about it. But they are still just not very good snap in and snap out. I mean, there's multiple times where Burford ends up on the ground, or he gets to the second level and he doesn't touch anybody in the linebacking core, safety, or anything. He gets his hands on nobody. There was also multiple times throughout that game where basically the rush came and both of those guys had one person they were responsible for, like a double team block. And that one player either split them or went around them both. There was just a lot of really bad reps. And it's not just happening in the pass game, it's happening in the run game. Now, again, it's not every snap, but it's enough to be concerned, especially against a defensive line that, Shea called bums. I'm not going to go that far. They're a young unit. They're an up and coming unit. I don't know, how good or bad they're going to be long term. But outside of Aaron Donald, there's not a lot there that we know about. So for them to get beat as badly as they did throughout that game at times, it is still very concerning. And I think it's going to continue to be concerning. And it's a work in progress that we're going to have to monitor all season long. It's just the way that it is.
If you had to grade the 5 O linemen individually, what grades would you give them, Jesse?
Well, I would give an A, obviously, to Trent Williams.
Yeah.
I would give an A to Banks. I think Banks is an absolute beast. I mean, that guy, Banks is really, really good, man. He's really good. Brendel, I would say I give a B to. He had a couple, iffy reps, but for the most part, he held up. And I would probably have put both the guys on the right side, Burford and McKivitz, at a D, a C minus. Like it just wasn't very good.
Yeah, so that is what 13. What's their GPA? That's a below a 3.0, right? They're like a C plus overall team based on those grades. The overall line, based on that.
I mean, the left side's absolutely incredible. I don't know that there's a better left side in football. I mean, we know that Trent Williams is not arguably, he still is the best left tackle in the game. Banks, I think, is, probably a top 15 guard in the game, not just left guard, but just guard in general.
Yeah,
I think at this point, they might be the best left side between those two. And then, the center's fine. It's not like Brendel's bad by any means, but then you get to the right side and
I noticed
it's not very good. Not right now. So
we all know over the last year and, so far 2 weeks in this game, the 49ers try to run to the left almost all the time. I noticed they ran one outside zone run to the right. At least one. I noticed the one. There might have been more, but the one I noticed, it was like -1 yard or back to the line of scrimmage for CMC. Yeah. There was nothing there, and I don't think they went back to it at all. Yeah.
Well, I posted 2 plays on Twitter, but one of them was a really good rep from Burford, where he actually held Aaron Donald pretty well. It was on the CMC touchdown run, and they went right up behind Burford there. It was a really good rep. And then there was a rep where they tried to go behind Burford again, and he just got shucked to the side and dominated. And that player got an arm on CMC, slowed him down, and it was enough for the Rams to corral him. So there, like I said, there is some good. It's not like it's all bad, or there's not a glimpse of being good at all. But for the most part, it's still not very good. And some of these D lines are definitely going to test them. We talked about the Giants. We know we have the Browns coming up. Dallas, you talked about. They're Philly at some point. The Ravens, like they're going to get tested. They're definitely going to get tested for sure. And I think that as long as they can show some improvement throughout the year, they're going to be fine. But right now, when you look at the course of the NFC, I mean, really, it's the 49ers, it's Dallas, and it's the Eagles. And if the 49ers have to beat Dallas and Philadelphia, both, or at least one of them to get to the Super Bowl, we know that they're going to challenge that right side of the O-line about as well as anybody. And so it's going to be a test that, hopefully they can pass not only in the regular season, but in the playoffs as well, because likely they're going to have to face it multiple times. So,
and I think it's a good opportunity to actually point out, like a lot of times we do point out that we think, and there's certain circumstances that this team makes Brock Purdy look better than he is. But in reality, when it comes to this offensive line on the right side, I think Brock Purdy in a lot of instances is making them look better than they are because he's getting the ball out quick. So you got to give credit to Brock Purdy for that as well.
No, I completely agree with that. In fact, last week I talked about how I thought one of the sacks that McKivitz gave up was on Brock Purdy. I thought he stayed at the launch point, and I was like, you know what? I would put that. It was the second TJ Watt sack. I was like, I put that on Brock. But there were 2 other could be or should be sacks in that game that McKivitz gave up to TJ Watt that Brock Purdy actually saved from being a sack. And so really he was net +1 as far as the sacks go because he saved McKivitz twice. McKivitz completely olayed TJ Watt. TJ Watt had a free run and Brock made a play and got rid of it. And so he definitely does make them look better at times. There's no doubt about it. So
yeah. Agreed.
Mike says nothing to say, just supporting the channel. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you, brother. Talking Head says people so scared we can't just say Purdy had a bad game and leave it at that. It was a bad game. He left 21 on the field. It's okay, but we can admit it. Yeah, so we're gonna talk about Brock Purdy and just the whole conversation, but that's kind of where I'm at. And I disagree saying it was a bad game. To me, it wasn't a bad game. There are bad games. In a bad game, to me, you have to turn the ball over probably multiple times to be a bad game. So I'm not going to go as far to say it was a bad game. I just think it was a C game. And I'll explain my reasoning later, but we definitely are afraid to have the conversation. I think some people are not willing to have it or be honest about it, and they're gun shy because they don't want to hear it from people, but you have to be real about what it was. Brother Bob says, whatever, Mike M, don't take my $2 super chats. Yeah. He says he's the king of $2 super chats, Mike. You can't also do it because that's what he does. So there we go.
Can we, Brother Bob, I got a request. For like at least a week, can you change your name to $2 Bob? I think that would be appropriate for a week, Bob.
$2 Bob. Perfect. All right, let's talk about the defensive line. We talked about the offensive line, and is it better than what we thought? We definitely expected the defensive line to be completely dominant coming into this season. I don't know that they've been that through 2 games. We've seen some flashes for sure. Is the defensive line just worse than what we expected?
So in regards to this Rams game, a couple of things. I think the Rams offensive line is actually better than people give them credit for or expected coming into the season. I haven't looked at the ratings after the last game against the Niners, but prior to that, after week 1, they were the second best ranked offensive line in the NFL, believe it or not.
Yeah.
The other thing is, just like Brock Purdy was getting the ball out quick, Matthew Stafford was getting the ball out really, really quickly. So they really didn't have time. Now, if you add the fact that Matthew Stafford was getting the ball out quickly, and then you consider the way the defense was covering the receivers of the Rams, giving them a lot of space, right? Stafford didn't have to hold the ball very long, right? They were giving him a big cushion. The corners were giving him a big cushion. Matthew Stafford would drop back. Ball comes out quickly. They actually had a lot of pressures. Nick Bosa, a lot of people, are down on Nick Bosa, and I get it. There's 105 players in the NFL with at least a half a sack, and Nick Bosa, the highest paid defensive player in the NFL, doesn't have one, doesn't even have a half a sack. So I get it, but he did have 5 pressures. But I think really why the 49ers defensive line didn't really show out against the Rams is because of the things I mentioned. I think the Rams O-line is better than we thought. I think because of the way we were playing defense on the receivers, giving them lots of space, it allowed the ball to come out quickly on this short passing game, and Matthew Stafford was dropping back and getting the ball out quick. So although we didn't have the results that we wanted, like with sacks and things like that, I just don't think it was a good opportunity because of how quick he was getting the ball out, because of the way our defense was playing, and because I think their O-line on the Rams is actually better than we thought.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with all those things. And I think when it comes to a defensive line, we often think about stack numbers and pressures and all these other things, and we forget that there's 2 facets. How are they against the run game? And remember, coming out of the preseason, a lot of people were concerned about that run defense and what would it look like, and can they stop the run, and how's that going to look? The run defense has been very good through 2 weeks. That is important to note. One issue that I have with, listen, you had to pay Nick Bosa. I get that. I was big on getting the deal done, so I'm not going to walk that back now. But one issue that I have in trying to put somebody like a Nick Bosa over the top of an elite quarterback, and those conversations happened this offseason. It was like, okay, would you trade Nick Bosa for Justin Herbert, or would you trade Nick Bosa for Lamar Jackson? And most people said no, they wouldn't. The reason that I think that is a crazy thought, that you wouldn't do those things, is because you can neutralize a defensive line. Not just a lineman, you can neutralize a defensive line when it comes to pass rush. And we saw exactly that this last week. Now, it's tough because when you're doing what the Rams did, you have to play perfect football for all 60 minutes. You can't have drops, which started to show out. Puka had a drop in that game. You have to run tight routes, which again showed itself. Tutu Atwell, the second pick, was completely on him. He ran the wrong route, didn't break off on the top of the stem the way that he needed to. So he ran the wrong route. It ended up being a pick. And you have to catch everything. And we saw that show up because Kyron Williams was hit directly in the chest. It bounced up in the air, and then Isaiah Oliver had an interception. So I'm not saying it's easy to play that brand of football, but if you have an elite quarterback and you have good pass catchers that can execute, you can really neutralize a defensive line when it comes to the pass rush. Green Bay, I think, at times did a fantastic job of this against the 49ers. Now, playoffs, it didn't matter. The 49ers were just too good. But you look at that last regular season game, with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they had their left tackle was out. I think their right tackle was out. And we went into that game going, oh my gosh, the 49ers are not only going to dominate this game, Bosa's going to have 3 sacks. He couldn't get anywhere near Rodgers because Rodgers was so damn quick in getting rid of the ball. There was nothing they could do about it. And they ended up winning that game. It was like week 3, 2 years ago or what have you. So there are ways to neutralize great defensive lines and great defensive linemen, which makes it really hard to choose those guys over elite offensive linemen and quarterbacks. It just does. So those are things that kind of make me a little worried when it comes to potential playoff matchups or Super Bowl matchups, because those quarterbacks and those receivers do exist to where this defensive line and the passing game anyways can neutralize things. What they have to continue to do and what they've done very well is to limit the run game. And as long as they can do that and kind of make a team one-dimensional, it makes the job easier on the secondary. But overall, no, I don't think the D-line is worse. I just think some quarterbacks, some coaches, and some wide receiving groups can neutralize them. And that's just the facts of the matter.
A lot of really good quarterbacks know how not to take sacks, right? Or offensive coordinators know how not to dial up plays that are going to get their quarterbacks hit. Speaking of, do you know what quarterback has 0 sacks so far this year?
Hasn't been sacked one time this year? Josh Allen.
Jimmy Jeezy. 0 sacks.
Jeez, all right. Well,
he's not getting sacked. He's not getting touched at this point in his career. He's getting that ball out quick. Trust me.
Yeah.
He's not. Yeah. I was like, wow.
He's throwing a lot of interceptions, though, so good for Jimmy.
Yeah, but he's not getting hit, so good for Jimmy. He's protecting the number one asset, which is himself.
Yeah. He's always done that. He's gotten the ball out too quick at times, almost as Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
Gammon says lack of tape on the Rams. New 11 to 14 starters. Yeah, I mean that's it too. The Rams have a good young team. Believe it or not, they're going to be fine for years to come. If Matthew Stafford can stick around there for a few years, Aaron Donald and Sean McVay, they might be able to rebuild that thing up a lot quicker than maybe we expected. They do have some good young talent. And one thing I'll say about them is they're an up-and-coming defense, but they're a very fast defense. That defense was flying around. To me, they were very, very impressive. They're maybe a couple really good players away from ever being a formidable defense week in and week out. But as far as team speed, that actually kind of shocked me. They were faster than I expected on defense.
Yeah, agree. Can we just admit that the Rams are better than most of us thought? Like all of us, probably even the Rams fans thought.
Yeah,
the Rams are better than everyone thought, even the Rams fans. All 5 of them. Yeah.
Well, tell me this, because I said, as I did Behind Enemy Lines, it really started to hit me talking to another Ryan, actually, from the Rams side of things, is that the Rams might be this year's Seattle Seahawks, meaning they have the quarterback, they have the coach, young team. Nobody expected probably more than 5 wins. They go out and get an upset win in week 1. Week 2, just like last year's Seattle Seahawks, they have to play the 49ers, which was, basically going to be a loss. But you can start to see a path to where maybe, just maybe, in a bad NFC, they can sneak into that 7th seed as far as a playoff team. I could see it. I really could.
I mean, the Rams were literally the difference. The Rams beat the Niners in almost every score, every box score except for the final score, and that was really just because of turnovers. If they didn't turn over the ball those 2 times, it's a different game. They might have won the game if we're being honest. So they're better than we thought. I know Niner fans don't like to say that, but I got to be objective and be honest here.
Well, and they get Cooper Kupp. I mean, that's going to only help them. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Enough about the Rams, though. This is a 49er channel, damn it. All right. Keenan Gim says the one this week that I'm concerned about is, will they allow Daniel Jones to give the Giants life? He will scramble. Just hope that they close in quickly on him. Yeah, I'm not too worried about Daniel Jones without Saquon Barkley. With Saquon Barkley, I think that would be something to talk about, but I just don't know where their offense is going to come from, man. I really don't. I really don't.
Scramble. He's going to be running for his life.
I think it's going to get bad on him. It's going to be bad on him. Shay says that it was Van Jefferson. You're right. It was Van Jefferson on the. He's talking about the bad. You know what? Actually, Shay, listen, Shay, you don't get to say anything to me bad at all, because guess what? You didn't show up in Pittsburgh. This guy all offseason, oh, can't wait to see you in Pittsburgh. It's going to be so fun. Even paid for his part of the room and then bailed a week before because he didn't get his flight. Loser. All right. $2 Chuck, brother Bob. There we go. Says, use me wisely. Don't run me into the ground like CMC. He's been a member for 4 months, and he says Rams suck. Would have been a blowout if Brock Purdy hits 3 passes. Yeah, maybe that's true.
It's true too.
I think the Rams are just slightly better than maybe we give them credit for, but we'll see. Time will tell. Time will tell. All right. Well, we've got a segment that we started last week, and I'm going to introduce it here with a little intro video, but it's our Unsung Heroes segment, and here we go. All right, Ryan, just a little introduction there. Every week we're going to do Unsung Heroes, and these are 49ers that may not get a lot of credit as to why the 49ers played well or won or were in a position to win. Can be coaches as well, so we can talk about coaches, players, what have you. But give me a player or two that you have coming out of that game that you think made a difference that maybe a lot of people aren't giving enough love to.
There's two that jump out at me. You want both of them at the same time or one at a time?
Let's go ahead.
I'm gonna go Isaiah Oliver and Jake Moody. Those two guys. And I think Jake Moody got a little bit of love, but Isaiah Oliver, man, he made a Johnny on the spot pick. I mean, it wasn't like he jumped a route and made an interception or anything, but he caught the ball when he had the opportunity, which was huge. That was a big difference in this game.
Not only that, I don't know. I didn't catch it in the moment for whatever reason, but it was a one-handed snag. I mean, he was kind of coming up to make a tackle, and the ball popped up behind him, and he had to reach out one-handed and pull that in. So it was actually a pretty good interception.
Yeah, and I've been critical on Isaiah Oliver. He didn't look in the training camp preseason week 1. Nothing stood out to me there. But in this game, he made that interception, which probably wasn't even the best play for him. I mean, it was the best result, right? The best result because of that play. But he made some really good tackles as well. He's not known for being a tackler, and he made some really good tackles that on third down to stop the Rams and force them to punt. So I got to give credit to Isaiah Oliver, especially because I've been so hard on him up until this point. I think it's only fair to point out when he has a good game, and I thought he played overall. He played really well. So I'm going to give a shout out to Isaiah Oliver. And the other one is Jake Moody. I mean, the guy hasn't missed a kick at all. Like another guy, Jake Moody is the same as Isaiah Oliver. It's your guys' fault, honestly, if I'm being honest, because you guys did not look good in the preseason. But then all of a sudden the real games start going and you guys look great. I mean, Jake Moody hasn't missed a kick at all. He kicked a 57-yard field goal, which I'm pretty sure it's the second longest field goal kick by a 49ers kicker in the history of the 49ers. And as a rookie, to be able to do that, especially having that kind of preseason he had, shout out to Jake Moody. If Jake Moody can make those kind of kicks on a regular basis, the 49ers are going to be in really great shape because there's a lot of games that are won and lost by the kicker. And I was nervous as hell about Jake Moody coming into the season. And based on the way he's kicked so far this year through 2 games, I'm super impressed. And it looks like it ended up being a decent draft pick after all. And so shout out to Jake Moody.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of those. I talked about them in the post game. Those were kind of my initial unsung heroes as well. I'm going to go with Jarvis here. He says Kinlaw. Kinlaw's another one that we have to give credit to. I mean, he had the batted down ball, which was huge, but just overall, he seems not only healthier. I mean, that much is clear, but I think this role is perfect for him where he gets to come in, play limited snaps, get after the quarterback. This role fits him very well. You're not putting a lot of pressure on him to be the guy. I think through the first, 3-4 years of his career, not only was he hurt, but there was pressure to be Buckner. You're the guy that replaced Buckner, and everybody's mad that Buckner's gone. And if Buckner was here and Buckner this and Buckner that, and what a bad pick it was, this guy's always hurt. Now he gets to be like next man up off the bench. You've got Javon Hargrave, or as Shannon Sharp calls him, Jerome Hargrove. You got Jerome Hargrove that's here from Philadelphia that is now taking that number 1 spot next to Armstead. And then you've got Kinlaw that comes in, plays his limited snaps, and he gets the job done. He seems a lot more comfortable in this role. The pressure's off of him. He's healthy. I'm just really happy for Javon Kinlaw and able to just see him play football, which is all that he's ever wanted to do. I hope nothing but continued success to him. And he's playing good football right now. And then the other one, talked about him a little bit earlier in the show, but Aaron Banks, man, he is so damn good. I don't know how many guards are better than him in the NFL. At the very worst, he's a top 15 guard in my opinion right now. He is playing really, really good football. He's not even fully refined yet. I mean, he's going to continue to get better, but he is a house of a man. I think it was the very first play of the game, he decleated Aaron Donald. And I'm like, okay, this guy is different. He's a people mover for sure, which when you look back a couple years, the way that his career started, how highly touted he was. A lot of people said that he wasn't looking good in camp the second year and that he may not amount to anything. He played extremely good football last year. And in this game in particular, I think he was phenomenal. I love Aaron Banks and what he did. So I'm going to give a shout out to those two guys in the trenches. So the four guys that got a shout out from us this week were Kinlaw, Banks, Moody, and Oliver. And I think all four of them definitely deserve it for sure.
Agreed. And shout out really to Kinlaw, because this goes to show you guys, like, writing people off as busts or whatnot is people got to stop doing that. They got to give players times. You know, I'm not saying Kinlaw is some elite guy right now, and maybe he will be, right? But people were saying he's an absolute bust. Right now, he's actually an actual player. He's healthy, and he's doing a fine job out there, man. So shout out to Kinlaw. And then again, I agree with you on Banks. He continues to be he's a player.
He's a damn good one for sure.
Yeah.
Jay coming in says Puka Nacua is the real deal, though. Yeah, he is. You know, Stafford deserves some credit too. Let's look at Stafford's career and how he's put receivers completely on the map as far as record-breaking years. Obviously, we know Calvin Johnson's incredible and would have been incredible no matter what. He was an athletic freak, a hell of a player, but he has a record-breaking year playing with Stafford. Then Stafford comes to the Rams, and he does the same thing with Cooper Kupp, who was a good player before. Not saying he wasn't, and he still, would have been a fine player, but he breaks records with Stafford. And then Puka Nacua, through 2 games, has the most catches of any rookie ever through their first 2 games. That's with Matthew Stafford as well. Matthew Stafford he basically zeroes in on one guy and is going to make them a superstar beyond belief. He is really, really good. And Puka Nacua, I think it'll be interesting to see. I'm curious to see what they do when Cooper Kupp comes back, because Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are kind of playing that similar role. So who's good enough to move outside? What do they do? Do they work them both from the inside somehow? I'm curious to see how that plays out. But Puka Nacua definitely is the real deal.
Check this out, Jesse. Matt Stafford through 2 games is 3rd in total passing yards. Puka Nacua is 2nd behind Justin Jefferson in total receiving yards. Yeah,
no surprise there.
Yeah, some people are like, "Oh, Puka once Kupp comes back, Puka's gonna fall off." And no, he's not. What he's been able to do, they're gonna find ways to find him as well.
Yeah, I think both of them can be efficient. They just gotta figure it out, because right now he's definitely filling that exact role that Cooper Kupp has. So they'll just have to figure it out.
Yeah.
$2 Chuck says Oliver used to be doo-doo brown and now he's decent. You see, what's funny? I'll say this. The overreactions week in and week out, and that's why I say it really is not only a year-to-year league, but a week-to-week league. People make sweeping judgments every single week. I tweeted out after this week, I said, oh, so I guess Geno Smith and Josh Allen are good again. That's good to see. You know what I mean? Like, the first week, these guys were horrible. I told you Geno Smith was terrible and he had a good year.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's only been 1 week. Can we chill out a little bit? Oh, guess what? Without both of his tackles, he played pretty damn good this last week. Oh, correct. Josh Allen, he's regressing. Look at his last however many games. He sucks. All right. Well, where's everybody when he's 31 of 37 with 3 tugs? Like, nobody's willing to talk about it. It's funny how people make sweeping judgments after each week, but such is
One
life.
game, especially week one. This week one
Right.
is week one. It's always weird. Yeah.
Right. Ink Talk TV says, "What's popping with the fellas? What's up, man? How you doing? Good to see you dropping in." $2 Chuck says, "Unsung hero, Aaron, no pressure or sacks allowed." Yeah, dude, I'm telling you. Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Gammon says, "I'm just dropping some cash because everyone else is." Well, I appreciate you, Gammon, even though you think I'm a hater of the third string quarterback. Brian J says, "Could be reaching, but are we playing off coverage to lessen the chance of injury to the DBs? The room's getting light. Didn't make any sense in the first half."
I think they were respecting the speed of the Rams, and I'm also wondering. This is something I'm wondering is Tarvarius's heel completely healed, because it was not headed into week one. So maybe they're also providing some cushion in that regard. So I don't know. I don't understand the game plan. Don't necessarily like it or agree with it. But it is what it is. We'll see what they do against the Giants.
Yeah, you know what's always been kind of interesting to me, and this is the third year in a row where I felt over the last 3 years, I've seen a clear shift in the defensive backs that the 49ers have brought onto this team, to where they're mostly man corners, yet they continue to play mostly zone, which it's just interesting to me. I don't know what the thought process is there, but when you look at Ambry Thomas, when you look at Deommodore Lenoir, when you look at Travarius Ward, hell, even Isaiah Oliver coming out of college at least, these are man type corners. That's what they're built to do. And you've got them playing a ton of zone. I don't understand necessarily the philosophy there. Are we for sure putting these corners in the best position to play their best football? That's up to the coaches to decide. But that's just an observation that I have. It's weird that you have predominantly man style corners, yet you play mostly zone. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but it's definitely what's happening. So Gammon says Ryan just called Kinlaw the real deal.
Okay,
that's fair.
I'm cool with that.
Totally fair. All right, let's get into these last couple topics. So the 49ers have a ton of cash, a lot of cap space. They have all their draft picks available to them. And I don't necessarily want to get into players that are available. I think it's too early for that. Maybe in a couple weeks, we'll have more of a clear shot of what teams are in it, what contracts are expiring, what players might actually be available. But if you could choose one position, any position, offense or defense, if the 49ers are to make a splash at the trade deadline, what position would you like to see them address to improve this team as they get into the latter half of the season and make their push for a Super Bowl?
Well, I would like to say left tackle because, or not left tackle. No, Trent's good. You're good, Trent. I was just kidding. I would like to say right tackle, but I don't think it's realistic to try to insert a right tackle in the midseason, especially on this offense. I think it's complex, and you need to go through the whole offseason. So I think the obvious answer is corner. I think it's DB. I think that's a position where you can actually insert a guy pretty quickly. And I think that's probably the biggest weakness on the team outside of maybe the right side of the offensive line. So I think it's no brainer. I mean, and I don't even think you need to do a trade. There's free agents out there, but if you are going to make a trade, that's who I would trade for. Get yourself a really strong corner. And I think that fills the other, there's two weaknesses on this team. It's the right side of the line, and it's the third. It's either the nickel or the other corner outside of Charvarius Ward. I do like Deommodore Lenoir, though. I honestly think it's too quick to write that guy off. But with Ambry, I'm not sold. He's so hot or cold. And then with Isaiah Oliver, it was one good game. I'm not sure if that's what we're going to see, if it's going to continue. So that would make me feel better if they were able to bring in another corner for the defense.
Yeah, most definitely. You actually took – this is why we should almost talk before the actual show, because you literally said verbatim what I was going to say is right tackle is ideal. No doubt about it. But realistically, how many right tackles get traded at trade deadlines? It's very few and far between. You're likely getting a skill position player. You're going to get a pass rusher. You're going to get a corner, wide receivers. Like those are the types of players that are likely traded at the trade deadline. Now, I would agree that corner would be the preference between that and another pass rusher, just because I think the secondary is a little bit thin, especially with Womack being injured. And that sucks because I think Womack has the potential to be a really good player. And I would have loved for him to get developed over these next 6 or so weeks that he's going to miss. You have Ambry Thomas that's very iffy, to say the least. I mean, we saw it in training camp. It was almost like the running joke that every time Ambry was on a guy, we're like, all right, mouse in the house. They're going after Ambry here. And sure enough, they went after Ambry. You started to kind of see that this week as well, where wherever Ambry was at, they were attacking. Isaiah Oliver, I think the book's still out on him. I loved him coming out of college. Thought he was a really good corner, but more of a man corner. He hasn't necessarily lived up to those expectations with the Falcons. They ended up kicking him inside, which is where he's playing now predominantly for the 49ers. So I don't know for sure what he is or isn't, but definitely at the very least, the depth isn't there. And if you have an injury, another one, what are you going to do at that position? So I think corner would be preferential. That being said, I would settle with another pass rusher. I would, whether it's a Danielle Hunter, somebody like that. I don't know, again, who's going to be available. I'm just throwing a name out there. But I look at players like that, and I know that a good pass rush certainly can help the secondary play a little bit more aggressive. Now, the problem with that goes back to the conversation we had earlier in the show, Ryan, which was you can neutralize a good pass rush if you get the ball out quick. So if you're going to play soft zones and then just rush 4, I mean, that could be neutralized. So it wouldn't be my preference. I agree. I think corner is probably the most realistic possibility, probably the one that I would go after, but I would settle for another pass rusher as well. So either way, I'm fine with.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that we do have Womack, who is injured, may come back, may be fine.
Yep.
I'm not sure what the timeline is on him. You do have Luter Jr., who is going to be back after, I think right in time for the Cowboys game is actually the soonest he can come back. But again, he's unproven. I was mad that Deshaun Jameson and Quantrez Knight were not on the original 53-man roster because I had them on the original 53-man roster. But now one's in Carolina, I believe, and one's on the freaking Cardinals.
One just got snagged. Quantrez Knight, yeah.
Quantrez Knight was good, man. Quantrez Knight and Deshaun Jameson were both better than Isaiah Oliver in training camp and in the preseason. But because of roster politics, they stuck with Oliver and try to sneak those guys on the practice squad. Deshaun Jameson, who is also a really good return man, was snatched. And then they had Quantrez Knight on the practice squad who just got snatched by the Cardinals. So unfortunately, the position where they lack depth, they just lost 2 players that could have really helped with that.
Yeah, and they are working out Bradley Roby. We'll see what comes of that. I mean, he's been a starting corner in this league for many, many years. In fact, last year was predominantly a starter in New Orleans. Started about 10 games. He's decent. I mean, as far as a depth piece goes, I'm not mad at it. But I'm talking like a big splash. When you have this much money and you have all your draft picks available and you're trying to win a Super Bowl, they have the opportunity to make a major upgrade somewhere, anywhere that they choose if the players are available. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. It's not just a depth piece. I want to see a starting caliber player come onto the 49ers at any of the positions that we talked about, whether it be tackle, which would be great, not likely, corner, or edge rusher. I think any of those 3 I would be very, very happy with. Just somebody that you can use and upgrade your team and elevate your team as you make this run. Not that the 49ers aren't good or that they can't win a Super Bowl as is, but if you're truly all in, you have the assets now to be truly all in come the trade deadline. The 49ers in the past have done a very, very good job of making these moves at the trade deadline that have helped elevate the team. And I wouldn't expect this year to be any different. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Actually, this is the year, to go all in. You got to do it this year. I mean, you have the money, you have the team. This is the year to go all in. I don't see a ton of free agents. I was just looking that are big difference makers. So it will have to come through the trade by the trade deadline. I'm not sure who they will trade or what they'll trade. Probably draft capital, I'm assuming. But I feel like, yeah, man, this is the damn year. Go after it. Get the best players you can. Make this shit happen. Excuse my language.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. This is the year to do it. So All right, let's get into these super chats before we hit this last topic. $2 Chuck says, I'm almost pissed off again about Quantrez Knight. What the F? Yeah, it sucks, man, but that's the risk that you play, and that's the other thing too, is when you have a lot of really good players, you can't keep them all. You eventually need to move on. $2 Chuck comes back and says, need a cornerback, defensive end, but who? Well, we like to give away first. Yeah, I don't know who. We're going to pay attention as it gets closer. As we get into, let's say, going into week 6, week 7, I'm going to have a much clearer picture, and we all will. We'll all have a much clearer picture. So this conversation is going to come up again in a few weeks, and when it does, assuming a trade hasn't been made, not only are we going to have position groups, but we're going to have actual players to talk about as well. So that's something to keep in mind on.
Sorry to interrupt. Someone in the chat said, sign Dante Johnson. Yeah, it was a good comment. Good comment.
That's the over-the-top move. That's the one.
Yeah.
Bong Sang Kim says Bryce Young's scout report was almost about Purdy. Yeah, very similar. Bryce Young, I think he's going to be fine. For me, I had him third out of the quarterbacks. I had CJ Stroud 1. Mm-hmm. I had Anthony Richardson as like a 1B. I couldn't really decide between the two. And then I thought Young was a step back, and then Will Levis was dog water. I had him nowhere near the top 3. I don't even know how people had him in the conversation. And the NFL seemed to agree by letting him fall way down the draft board, ended up there in the second round or what have you. But that's the way that I saw it. So far, that's the way it's playing out. But again, I like to give quarterbacks 3 years before I make a full judgment. We're only 2 years into their career. But I think the things, at least early on, that I liked about CJ Stroud and Richardson are definitely showing through for sure.
Dude, Bryce, yeah, like I had the same ranking as you. I retweeted it yesterday on Twitter because I think CJ Stroud is like the no-brainer, the best pick in the draft.
Bro, he's so accurate.
Dude, he's in the top 5 in passing yards right now. I think he's number 3, and he's a rookie. So the future is bright for him. Dude, Bryce Young looked like, like when you're young and you go to your first dance and you're like, standing there all nervous and like, like don't want to talk to girls. Like that's what he looked like yesterday in the huddle. Like he's just, I mean, again, Bryce Young it's way too early to write him off, but based on what I've seen so far, it's not good. It's not a good sign. Maybe it changes.
Yeah. He wouldn't have been my pick. I think he is talented. I think that he definitely can be a good player. It may take some time, and we'll see how it goes. But when I was looking at it, especially, I thought CJ Stroud, I looked at him and go, oh man, if Kyle Shanahan had CJ Stroud, he would be in heaven. CJ Stroud is so precise with the football. I genuinely, and I don't like completion percentage as a stat. A lot of people look at completion percentage and say, all right, this quarterback's accurate and this one's not. And I completely disagree with that. Josh Allen, to me, was a great example. I thought coming out of college with a completion percentage of like 57%, a lot of people are like, he's not accurate. I'm like, I think he's very accurate. You just don't see how tight the windows are for him to where Baker Mayfield's at like 70+%, but he's throwing to wide open guys on a regular basis. Same thing with CJ Stroud. It's not just, yes, I get it at Ohio State, guys run free, but the ball placement, time in and time out is so perfect from CJ Stroud. And you're seeing that in the NFL. And if Kyle Shanahan had a CJ Stroud, oh man, dude, that type of player would be incredible with him.
I watched the combine and all the quarterbacks at the combine. I just left it like, okay, CJ Stroud's the guy. I mean, he's just the natural thrower of the football. Everything's so smooth and it's just perfect. Like it was a no-brainer to me. I don't know what the hell the Panthers were doing.
Yeah. Well, whatever. $2 Chuck says, Vish, my other guy in here, even though he likes Pickett. Is he in here? I didn't see if Vish was in here. I'm not doing a good job keeping up on the chat the way I normally do. Mike Baker says, if I could build a perfect team, you would be over the cap. Yeah. If you could build a perfect team, you would be over exactly. You're going to have deficiencies. But oddly enough, the 49ers, because they have an inexpensive quarterback right now, have the opportunity to almost build the perfect team, as close to perfect as you can get, because they have all their assets, because they have all this money, because they have an inexpensive quarterback. They have the opportunity, at least for this season, to get about as close as you can to perfection. We'll see what they do at the trade deadline and if those opportunities present themselves. But man, I don't know that with the salary cap restrictions, that if they go make a splash move at the deadline, that you could really, truly build top to bottom a better team than what the 49ers have put together. And that's why they've got to win a Super Bowl, man. Mm-hmm. All day, every day, Kim says Kyle doesn't want CJ Stroud. He's too athletic. He ain't even that athletic. I mean, he is athletic, but he's not like he's a pure quarterback, man. Pure quarterback. MGM Productions says, did you guys hit on William Jackson? Philly got him in for a workout. Why not kick the tires on him instead of Roby? He's younger with more upside. Yeah, I didn't talk about William Jackson. There are guys out there. I think the 49ers, when it comes to not necessarily the trade, but if they're going to pick up a guy off free agency, they tend to lean towards these veteran type players, guys that they don't have to worry about coaching up, that they know can just come in and play football, that they trust. And I think that's kind of the thought process there, but we'll see if they end up signing anybody or if they make a trade or what have you. All right, let's get into it, man. The Brock Purdy conversation.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, exactly. The show is titled Brock Purdy Conversation That Has People Scared. And it's not a conversation that isn't being talked about or anything like that. I'm not going to come to you with any breaking crazy news that you haven't heard, but more so just being willing to have the conversation, a true conversation. It seems like the community as a whole is very gun shy to even mention his name. If you can't say, it's like the old adage, your mom tells you or your parents tell you, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And that's what I feel like is happening with Brock Purdy. It's like, if you're not over the top with your praise of Brock Purdy, you can't even mention his name. Don't even say his name, because otherwise you're a hater. You're not a true fan. People aren't willing to have the conversation. And I think it's horseshit, man. I think you have to be willing to have the conversation, especially now that he's the only guy in town. He is the quarterback of this team. The expectations are a Super Bowl. You have to be willing to talk about it. Now, that doesn't mean that you go over the top and crap on him when he has a game like he had on Sunday. Again, I gave him a C in that game. There was nothing awful that I saw in that game. People are really talking about the 3 misses, but for me, the reason I gave him a C wasn't just the 3 misses. To me, he had 7 passes. He completed, I think he was like 19 to 25, if I remember. So 7 of his 25 passes overall were off target, which is not like Brock. The one thing that makes Brock good is he's got good timing, good accuracy. He was not accurate on Sunday. He just wasn't. 7 of his passes, I think, were not on target. Some of those, 3 of those were completed, but nonetheless, we talked about CJ Stroud, and what I thought made him great was his ball placement. Regardless of whether a guy's open or not, or whether you complete the pass, doesn't necessarily mean that you're an accurate passer. And on Sunday, I didn't look at Brock for the most part as an accurate passer the way that I've come to expect from him, right? And then the other thing is 6 of his 19 completions were screen passes. So when you take those things into account, I think overall I gave him a C. You can't give him anything lower than a C, in my opinion, because he didn't turn the ball over. And one thing that I said on Sunday, I tweeted this out. When it comes to Brock Purdy, we spent a whole offseason talking about the ceiling. Well, what about the floor? Because yes, there are guys in this league, no doubt about it, the Josh Allens, the Mahomes, the Herberts, the Lamars, the whoever you want to mention, that clearly have a higher ceiling than Brock Purdy. However, Brock Purdy has a very high floor. And that's what makes the 49ers comfortable with this situation. If this is the worst that you're going to get from Brock Purdy, and long term, you're going to see worse games from Brock Purdy. But right now, in a 10-game sample size, that is arguably the worst that Brock Purdy has looked. If you can get a C game when he's not on, I'll take that. That is massive for me. Those C games versus a Sam Darnold, who we've kind of bagged on, who will give you those F games. Jimmy Garoppolo, we've seen those F games. Right now, if we can maintain the C games, I'm great with that. I have zero issue with that. You still clearly can win if he's not what you've come accustomed to with him. And we saw that on Sunday. But overall, why do you think people are just gun shy? Or do you, is that a me thing? Like, is that just me that's recognizing this, or do you feel the same way where people are just gun shy to even mention his name unless they're going to talk overwhelmingly positive about him?
I mean, you brought so I've been watching the chat since you started this topic, and people that haven't been commenting at all throughout this entire show are now just going ham in the chat. Like, they're just so mad that you actually brought up Brock Purdy's name without saying he's the next Joe Montana. Like, people just need to calm down. Like, Brock Purdy is good at a lot of things. He's great at some things. Most of his game is good. There's not much to criticize Brock Purdy about. Yes, he's won a lot of games, although I don't say QB. I don't think winning is a quarterback stat. It's a team game. So I will say that to you guys that said, the guy that says he hasn't effing lost in the chat. Like, calm down, breathe in, breathe out. It's going to be okay. I think that the bigger conversation that we need to have right now is not really about Brock Purdy. It's about the fans and some of the media that are unwilling to just let's have an honest conversation. It's okay to say that Brock Purdy is good at most things. And it's also okay to say that he needs to improve in some areas. Those areas being his deep game, which is why I called him dink and dunk, why everyone got pissed off. And you may categorize it how you want to. You may say it's not dink and dunk. You could say whatever you want to. But the bottom line is Brock Purdy has not shown yet that he's a good deep ball passer. Can he become a good deep ball passer? Yeah, he probably can. If Brock's mentality and the way he is as a man, like his makeup, I think
not only he probably will. Like, right?
Well,
you know what I mean? Like,
I would know that. I'll say he can.
I'll say this. The reason that I would say he probably will is because he does have all the mental makeup that you want. Like, if he doesn't, it's because maybe there's truly like the physical limitations or just too much to overcome. But it's definitely not going to happen because of lack of work ethic, lack of wanting to be great, lack of doing everything you can to be great. Like, those are not going to be the reasons that he doesn't become very good in those areas, right? And that's all he can control. He can't control maybe being 6'1" or you know, whatever the physical limitations are. He can't control those. But what he can control, he's absolutely going to do everything in his power to control those things. Like that, I can guarantee. That I know.
I agree with that. What I was saying is, like, I agree with what you're saying. But the point I was trying to make is I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying he can because of the things you mentioned. I think it's possible that he can be better at it. Now, whether his arm limitations prohibit that from actually end up happening, or maybe Kyle Shanahan dials back these deep throws. What needs to happen is Kyle Shanahan needs to keep dialing these things up for Brock Purdy,
for sure,
because he's not going to learn it in practice. He's got to learn it in games, right? He's got to learn the timing on it. And I think the issue with Brock Purdy is not that he can't throw the ball 35 to 45 yards. Every NFL quarterback can. Is can he be consistent when he does it? I don't think Brock Purdy's ever going to be making 50, 60-yard bombs like some quarterbacks in the NFL. But that's probably not important. But what is important is those 25 to 45-yard passes, being consistent at that range, being able to do that 3-4 times a game. That is important. That's why Kyle Shanahan dialed him up. And it's okay to say that Brock Purdy is good at everything else but that. So far, it's okay to say that. That doesn't make you a Brock Purdy hater. I don't see how anyone hates Brock Purdy. I don't see how anyone hates Brock Purdy. People think I hate Brock Purdy because I'm being honest about my evaluation and him and his limitations so far. But nobody hates Brock Purdy, man. Nobody does. How can you hate the guy? He's so likable. He has a lot going for him, and he's doing really well. I mean, I can read you out Brock Purdy's numbers for the season and where he ranks amongst other quarterbacks. He's doing good. I have him somewhere between 12 and 17. If he can turn that notch up, turn that degree up on those deep passes that we're talking about right now, he can climb up into that top 10. And I think that's the only thing missing from his game. Not saying he can't ever learn it. I'm just saying he needs to continue to develop in that area.
Yeah, and I think if we're going to choose, like, what would you prefer that he's good at right now? Like, if there was something he had to improve, I would prefer the things that he's good at over the things he's not good at if I'm choosing. Because when you look at a quote unquote deep ball, that's even like the top level quarterbacks in the NFL that complete a lot of them or throw a lot of them. Anything above 40 yards, it's like maybe 30 attempts a year. Like, you're just not making that pass very often, you know? So it's a small part of your game. So the stuff that it makes up 95% of your game.
Correct.
The intermediate, the short game, he lives in that area. He does fantastic in that area. And so that right there is the launch point. Like, that's the starting point. So if he can add that extra part to his game, I mean, what can't he do at that point, right? Like, we know he's mobile. We know that he can complete the short passes. We know he can go intermediate. He's proven those things. Now, if he can start to complete those deep passes and push the defense off the line to help out and make some of those underneath throws easier on him than they already are, then, like, really, what is the weakness in his game? You know what I mean? So that's really what it comes down to is how can he reach his full potential? And that is what's missing right now. But again, to me, and I haven't checked the chat, but you said that they went crazy. At no point when I was talking about Brock Purdy did I say that and same with you, did we say at any point that he's bad or he played awful or he sucks or the 49ers can't win with him? But you would almost think that if you're not just going to be over the top with glowing remarks, that anything that isn't overwhelmingly positive is perceived as a negative.
Yeah.
And it's like we can't go through the season like that. We just can't. If I can criticize, let's say, Eric Armstead without people being in an uproar, then guess what? When it comes to the starting quarterback of this team, and that's why I said things are going to be different. People got to be ready for this conversation. I talked about it in the offseason because I saw this coming. People have to understand that the last pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant, all that cute shit is out the door. The expectations have now changed. He is the perceived franchise quarterback of this team. And so people are going to talk about him as if he is that. He's going to get all the praise in the world when the 49ers are doing good and they're winning and he's playing well. And unfortunately, that also means when you're the franchise quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, a team that is expected to win a Super Bowl now or never, you're going to get a lot of backlash, whether it's deserved or not. Now, one thing you're not going to get from me, and I'm going to remain very consistent in this, is if Brock Purdy has a truly bad game, and this last Sunday was not a truly bad game. It was a meh game for me. It was a C game. That is not a bad game. It's just not a great game, and that's okay. But if you get the D or F game from Brock Purdy, one thing you're not going to get from me is me piling on, and I told you so, and this and that. That's not what you're going to get. I'm very, very consistent. I'm going to remain consistent. 3 years. So when Brock Purdy has great games or really bad games, I'm going to remain very even keeled. Now, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about where he needs to improve, but I'm not going to be out here pumping my chest one way or the other. Like, oh yeah, guys, this is what I'm talking about. You're not going to get that from me because I've got to see the 3 years. Give me these 3 years of Brock Purdy. We're in year 2. You're going to see some ups. You're going to see some downs. I need 3 years to make a full sweeping judgment on what I believe Brock Purdy is or is not. But when he plays good, like last week, you're going to get all the flowers in the world. And when it's not as good, you're going to hear that it wasn't as good and he needs to improve. You're going to hear that from him. You're going to hear that from the coaches. You're going to hear that from the content creators. And if you're that uncomfortable to even just have the conversation, I think that's where the problem starts. And people have to be ready for the conversation, fair or not. People have to be ready for that conversation because it's going to happen all season. Excuse me. It's just the way that this works.
My take on Brock Purdy's game, as far as those deep throws is concerned, right? He has to be able to hit those wide open throws
for sure,
because that's what an NFL quarterback does. That's my take. And if you challenge that take, I just quoted Brock Purdy about himself. I'm telling you the same thing Brock Purdy is telling you in the press conference. He has to hit those. Those are layups. If it's 30, if you're at the, it doesn't matter if it's 30 yards, 20 yards, 15 yards. If the guy's wide open, it's a layup for an NFL quarterback. He's got to hit that. Now, I think he can. My biggest worry isn't about Brock Purdy, whether he's able to learn that or not. It's whether Kyle Shanahan continues to dial it up for him. And I think based on what everything Kyle Shanahan said about Brock Purdy, I think he believes in this guy, and I think he'll continue to give him the opportunities. It would be a disaster if Kyle Shanahan said, oh, after this game, I'm not going to dial those up for him anymore. He's got to keep dialing up those type of plays for Brock Purdy. And I think if he does, eventually he can improve and be better there. Brock Purdy is elite. 10 under 10 yards, money. Under 20 yards, money. 20, 25 yards, money. Honestly, he's really good in that intermediate range. You go beyond that, and he's a little bit below average on his completion rate. Again, though, it's a small sample size. Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft. He's only played, 10, 11 games. So, like Jesse says, I don't judge quarterbacks instantly like that. I'm not going to write off. Like, I'm never going to say Brock Purdy can't do this. I'm just saying so far he has not shown that he has been able to. That's been my overall point on Brock.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, it's funny because I think anybody that was pro Lance is perceived a Brock Purdy hater. But you can go through the comment section on YouTube after Sunday, and really on Twitter, and it was funny because so many people were down after Sunday for whatever reason. He has one not great game, and people lost their mind over it. And I was like in there defending him. I'm like, listen, you guys have to understand that Brock Purdy deserves grace. He wasn't even supposed to necessarily be playing yet. Like, the fact that he was playing was already a small miracle in itself. But one thing that we talked about all offseason is Brock Purdy this offseason, whether he played week 1 or not, was not going to get the chance to improve the way that he deserved. Going into year 2, that is a major developmental offseason for players. Unfortunately for him, that developmental time turned into rehab time. So the improvement week 1 wasn't necessarily going to be there. Week 2 wasn't necessarily going to be there. What he now has to do is figure out how to get better on the job. Now, that can take some time, and we'll see it. And actually, I think the biggest leap for him, we see it with quarterbacks in general, but if he can stay healthy, next offseason, you're going to see, I would think, the biggest leap of his career, because he's going to have the offseason to improve, and he will now have a full season plus under his belt, another playoff run, regardless of how far they go. So that's when you're going to see the improvement. But unfortunately for him, we haven't been able to see that improvement because he was rehabbing. So now he has to improve throughout this season, and I believe he will. So let's see where he's at week 10, week 11, week 12. That's when you're going to get probably a full grasp of who Brock Purdy will be, at least for this season. I'm not saying for his career, but for this season forward throughout the rest of the year, that's what you're going to see what Brock Purdy truly is. Not week 1, 2, and 3. He didn't have the offseason to be able to improve. And I think people have to remember that as they critique Brock Purdy or talk about Brock Purdy. That is a real thing. He just didn't have the offseason to improve. It was all spent rehabbing. And that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and again, this conversation isn't really even about Brock Purdy as much as it is about some of the fans in this fan base and some of the media and the way they cover him. It's okay to be honest and real about Brock Purdy. I think that's the moral of this whole last 10 minutes of this conversation. It's okay to be real about Brock Purdy. We can talk about what he's great at. We can talk about where he needs to improve.
Yeah, I mean, more so, it's listen, you can fan how you want. I'm not going to gatekeep how you fan or how you have conversations. That's not my job. But more so than anything, this is telling you is that the conversation is going to remain consistent and real from me throughout the whole season. So when it's good, I'm going to tell you it looks good. And when it's bad, I'm going to tell you, hey, you know what? We need to see some improvement here. And maybe if it doesn't look as good as what you thought, maybe that's the week that you take off. And I respect you and appreciate you. And I know that you'll be back. So come around the weeks that it's great, get riled up and tell me how much of a hater I am and that, you told me so about Brock Purdy. And then the weeks that it's not so great, then maybe just sit that one out. Like, that might be the way to go for you. You know what I mean? Just for your sanity. And I'm fine with that. I respect that. Fan how you want to fan. But as far as the channel goes and how I talk about the conversation, I'm going to be consistent and I'm going to be real the whole time. Sorry.
The fan how you want to fan, it goes both ways. We're both fans, right? I'm not here telling you I'm not a fan. I'm a 49ers fan. So you guys are welcome to fan how you want to, but I'm going to do the same, right? I'm going to analyze. I like to analyze. I like to be real about how I view stuff, right? I don't like to be in this fake fandom world where the Niners can do no wrong. I don't live like that. If you want to live like that, that's fine. You probably won't like my channel, though.
Yeah. Well, but also like today, I mean, shoot, we went an hour and 15 Well, we still got a little left, but we've gone an hour and 15, and for an hour, it was like full praise. You know what I mean? They deserve praise. If we feel like things are going well, we're gonna tell you things are going well and that they're awesome. And we even took it a step further. Like, who are some unsung heroes? Let's look at Shanahan's leadership, not just from like, hey, we won the game. Of course, we're going to be positive, but like, let's dig deeper into the positivity. Let's really give people who may not give get shout outs. Let's give them their flowers. Let's talk about the leadership and how we've seen a shift in Kyle Shanahan. We're going to be positive when it's warranted, but that's not always, unfortunately. And so, like I said, maybe sit those ones out. It's not, no problem there. $2 Chuck says Kevin's dad, PP, about to overreact and obsess over Brock Purdy. God. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, everybody can have the conversations that they want to have. All day, every day, Kim says, yes, CG is a pure quarterback, 100%. But we would run him like he's juice. Listen, I would like to hope that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Steve M says Brock has arm fatigue from the injury. He is overcompensating, pressing, and trying to figure it out. Worried about the short week for him. Hope I'm wrong. Yeah, I don't want to go. I'm not going to try to make something out of nothing. I don't know about arm fatigue or any of that. I don't know fully. I have my theories as to what's causing maybe some of the misses on the deep passes. But for me, my concerns, which aren't really concerns, I think he's going to be fine. But it was less about missing those deep balls, because that's kind of what I've seen from him in the past, is that he's not going to be 100% on those, which is fine. It was more about some of the other passes that he's normally money on, that he was just off. And it started from the very first pass of the game. Should have known right away that maybe he wasn't going to have his best stuff that day. And that's fine. They still won. They still put up 30. It is what it is. It just wasn't his best day. It wasn't. But it wasn't awful either. $2 Chuck says, how dare you guys objectively critique our quarterback? I know. Gammon says, Jesse, you just riled up everyone for your next call-in show by bringing Brock up. I need the chat to stop being lost and join the Allen Sam Drive. Is that where it's at? That's where we've gotten. What's up, Coach? This is what a lot of people don't know. Coach and I have not been able to find a way to put a show together, but every day for about an hour and a half, we talk on the phone. I go for my walk and he and I talk. So we have a lot of good conversation that would translate, I think, very well into a show. But we both kind of had our season lined up before that became a possibility. So we'll see. But the coach says the Purdy hate is unreal. Who are these guys? Freaking posers. These content creators make me crazy. John's the father. Kyle's the son. Brock's the Holy Ghost. He's my quarterback. I hate you, Coach. I absolutely hate you. And $2 Chuck says, Coach, laugh out loud. Bring the same energy with PP after the Brock Purdy F. All right, y'all. Listen, I'm going to be back later tonight with Sunil. I know that Ryan has a show every day at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, so make sure you tap in with him. We will be back next Tuesday as well. Short week, condensed week. Today or tonight with Sunil. Tomorrow, Behind Enemy Lines, after 49ers After Dark, and then we got a Thursday game. So make sure you stay tapped in here. We're going to talk nothing but 49ers. Another great win. Should be another great win on Thursday. We will see. But until later tonight, peace.